I can't have my daughter hear this profane word when she's 3 to these kids that play a sport that she loves and she wants to play one day, and then come home and say, well, honey, I was just talking to them, but you're not supposed to use that same language, and you won't hear me use that language to you.
What's up, guys? This is Michael Horn. Welcome to Fatherhood Podcast. Today I have kind of a local legend, we'll call it. He's a 28-year veteran coach, boys basketball, and transitioned to a role of a mental performance coach. 7 years with some business and entrepreneurship. Welcome, Jason Mays. Most people would hear you introduce you as coach, but I'm going to introduce you as Jason. How you doing?
I'm great. I am blessed and fortunate and humbled to be here with you, and happy that you're off to good runnings with this podcast. I think it's a powerful vehicle for you.
I appreciate it. I kind of reached out to you early on whenever I had this vision. I was like, man, I really like to pick your brain. I've heard you talk a lot. Yeah, you do a lot of X and O stuff. You're very professional how you execute that, but also know you're a dad. And so kind of like to switch gears and talk some fatherhood stuff, maybe not what your normal podcasts would contain, but I definitely want to tap into that. So you're a father of 2, right?
Yeah.
And your son is 19, daughter's 15.
Yep. Jason Reagan. Jace was born in 06 when I was still coaching at Georgetown College, and he had a traumatic birth. My wife was 18 hours in labor, and that caused some issues for him, and his lungs and his brain weren't communicating, to make it simple. And he passed away 3 times, and they brought him back 3 times. So he's special. I think he gets that mental toughness sort of from divine intervention for, God really wanted him in this world because he went through a lot to be in this world. And that sort of caused me to pause on coaching because I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to be the father but more importantly, the husband that I was created to be. And his birth scared me. And so there's some things I regret about getting out of coaching at that time, but there's also some things I'm glad of why I got out of coaching at that time. And then Reagan was born in 2010. She is a lot like me. Jace is a little bit more like his mother. But Reagan is very stubborn. She knows what she wants, and she defends her intuitions and has been doing that for quite some time, not just recently. So it's going to be fun watching her grow up, because whoever decides to ask her hand in marriage, I don't think I'll have the shotgun approach when they show up at the door, sling a shotgun over you, this is my daughter. No, I'm like, good luck, brother. So they're both 2 different kids, both very strong, both very grounded, and we try to do the best we can as parents of them.
Is there differences, boys and girls, as they get older? Now that they're 19 and 15, so you know if there's differences like parenting. Like, did you treat Jace a certain way versus how you treat Reagan?
I think there's developmental stages in children's lives. Jace was an easy baby. He had some issues from birth that we had to deal with medically for a while, but really all that subsided after 6 months. Reagan was a little bit more of a whiny baby, needed a little bit more maintenance than Jace. And then the second stage, when they can crawl and walk and figure things out and using speech, they both are really fun. That age where they're gaining independence and toddling around, and that was really, really fun as a parent for both of our children. And then they sort of go into the stage where they want to try different things, whether it's in sports or extracurriculars at their school. They develop friendships, and then as parents, you develop friendships with their friends' parents, and so that's another season. And that was fun for both of our kids. Of course, it was heavily involved with sports. And then now, they're in high school. Jace is a senior and Reagan is a freshman, and they're sort of navigating the waters of their identity again. So Jace is sort of on the tail end of that, and will have to go through that process again as he exits high school. Reagan's at the beginning of that as she's entering high school. and just watching the ebbs and flows of them adapt to their social settings while maintaining the standards, the godly standards that we hope and pray they maintain. As parents, I think it's sometimes easy to get tunnel vision and sort of force them into a life that we know is healthy for them, but rather can let them figure it out for themselves. And whenever they sort of stray close to the boundary, then we shepherd them back in. I think there's a different approach in parenting that way. I think because I'm a coach, I would call that let them fail. Don't protect them from failure. And I think we've done a good job of that with both of our children.
Yeah. And I know I kind of had a structure how we were going to go with this, but let's just be real. When I put that clip up there with Jason Mays on there, there's probably gonna be a lot of coaches that want to hear you, or a lot of people talking from the basketball world. I do want to just jump in early on. What is that like balancing? It takes a lot to be a winning coach. It takes a lot to have that as your job and as your profession, because even when you're not in season, obviously you have off season where you work for the next one. And like you talked on other platforms, you work around programming. So really it's a year round deal. What's the gives and takes with that with parenting? Is it just the kids been raised in the gym? How's your wife handle it? Is there any guilt? I know this is a loaded question. You'll be able to answer it though, but just kind of walk us through early stages and even up till recent years. What's parenting? What's dad like versus coach? And do those hats change on and off?
It's a really big question. It's a fun one to tackle. So let's start with an example. Signetti, the IU football coach right now, we're a week away from the national championship game where Indiana, I think, is playing Miami. And I was watching him on an old interview when he was at James Madison as the head football coach. And he said something that I think was powerful. He said, they asked him about family, coaching family balance, right? And he's like, make no mistake about it. If you want to win, you have to be wedded to winning and the process that is involved with that. He used the word wedded, like wedding, married to. And it's true. If you're not wedded to whatever it takes to win, you're not obsessed, you're going to leave meat on the bone when it comes to winning pursuits, sports, business, life in general. I'm not one that says you have to have this perfect family life balance. Can it be achieved? Yes, I've achieved it. Okay. But there's also times where you're not in balance. That is where being grounded in my faith and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and being married to a godly woman and raising kids with biblical teachings allows me to wander off into that obsessed coaching at times. And I can come back because they accept it. Matter of fact, my family valued it. So it's hard because sometimes an immature marriage, and this is a podcast about being a parent, about being a father. But I think what we have to understand is you're going to be a better father, the better husband you are. And so in coaching, you have to have that support. And if you don't, you can't be wedded to winning. You can't be obsessed with it because it's going to break down. Because there's going to be times where your spouse and even your kids feel like because more time is spent elsewhere and in coaching with other people's kids, then that must be more important.
Yeah.
And it's not. Coaching in any team I've had and the relationships I've had with those teams has never been more important than the relationship with my wife, with Jace, and with Reagan. Ever. Ever. Not even close. But I've spent more time with a lot of those teams at different times than I have with my wife, Jace, and Reagan. Why? Because that's what being wedded to winning involves. You have to have those interpersonal relationships with the players and the coaches that you go through that journey with. And if you don't, you're not going to win. And so if you're not winning as a coach, you're going to bring that side of it home as well. And that's going to cause problems. So I think that the most important notion for coaches as they balance being obsessed with winning and being obsessed with being the best husband and father they can be is more time spent doesn't always necessarily mean priority. More time spent needs to be seasonal, okay? And it doesn't need to be 24/7, 365. But yeah, I mean, in February, I'm spending more time with my team than I am at home, okay? So more time spent doesn't mean that entity that you're spending more time with is more important. That is, you have to have humility as a spouse to understand that. And you have to, as a child of a coach, you have to share your father with other people. And that requires humility. Both my kids have never had a problem doing that. And I am very grateful for that. But that's probably the biggest and earliest hurdle that coaches who win are going to have to get over is have a family that understands that more time spent doesn't mean that entity is more important. So it's that's a lesson I learned early.
Yeah, and I think, obviously we're talking coaching because that's your background, but you did mention business stuff, and I think that's just with anything. Like, kind of shout out my wife here as I launched this late October. This has been my time, whether it's doing this or editing or clipping or trying to schedule or trying to find guests or sending email. Like, I I find myself in this chair a lot because I want this to be successful. I'm apologetic to my wife a lot. She, luckily, with humility, hey, I don't need you to apologize. I see what you're doing. I understand it. I don't take it as, there's not a jealous stage or like a, hey, you're all dedicated to that podcast and not me. Like, I think that makes having people like that or having children like that, I'm sure it makes it a little bit easier than if your spouse wasn't too fond of that mission or that goal. I'm sure it would cause some hiccups in your personal life.
Yeah. I think having kids involved in sports helps. I think having a competitive wife helps. A lot of people don't realize this about my wife, who is a school administrator and has been an educator for 24 years almost. Prior to that, and even during the early parts of that career, she was a 8-time world champion clogger. Her old clogging team's been on America's Got Talent. They finished second in one of the earlier seasons. If you ever go to the Carolina Opry down in Myrtle Beach, the clogging show that takes place every night at the show, that's her old clogging team. Like, she could have made a whole lot more money sticking with clogging than she is being a principal. But she was really good, like really good, like one of the best in the world. And she gave that up by age 22, 23, and she was always a cheerleader. And then she got into coaching cheerleading, whether it's at the middle school level or at the college level. And every level she coached at, she won championships as a cheerleading coach. Then I see her coach teachers. If there was such a thing as championships or a postseason run for coaching teachers, she'd be in the Final Four every year, And so her understanding winning, and then my kids understanding that winning is better than losing helps. I'm not so sure though. Here's a question. I'm just thinking out loud here. I know me. I know I hate to lose more than I love to win. And I'm not so sure I'm proud of that, but I'm honest about it. Okay. Winning to me is a relief that the process that we went through to get the win is validated. It worked. I'm practicing the right things. We're focusing time on the right things in the right areas. So a win's like, okay, we're on the right track. A loss is you're screwing us up. And so it causes you to reset things. And so I don't like losing. I hate losing more than I love winning. I think that's an important question everybody needs to ask themselves. And there is no right or wrong answer. But it's funny that Jace is like me in that regards. Reagan, she likes winning more than she hates losing. My wife, she has her own views on it as well. So we've come to realize and respect each other. Like Jace, when he loses a baseball game, don't talk to him.
Yeah.
He is a miserable young man. He is moody. He's grumpy. He wants to come home, go in his bedroom, shower, go in his bedroom, go to bed, and leave him alone. He'll see you in the morning. Reagan, if she loses a game, she'll want to talk about it on the way home a little bit. Jace won't say a word, you know, and then, you know, she's going to go home, watch some YouTube, maybe do some homework, and she's okay, you know. So it's neat to see how they interpret winning. But having a family that understands at some level the importance of winning and the work that goes into winning helps in having a healthy relationship with your kids and your spouse.
Yeah. Looking at somebody in your position, it's cool as a coach that you can break down, how they win and lose and when to, like for me, obviously I've coached just youth stuff, middle school stuff, do not have a long track record.
You're a good coach, Michael. I've seen you coach.
It's I'm very passionate. I want success. How I am now versus how I was. I laugh at dads. There's dads I laugh at now that are coaching third, fourth, fifth graders. Like, dude, how are you that serious? But then I look, I'm like, man, that was me. Like that was me. That worked up over a fifth grade football or basketball game. And like, did you early on? I know both your kids are athletes and they play sports. Since you've had so many years of experience in coaching, is it easy or was it easy for you to have those rides home when performance wasn't the greatest? Were you a traditional, like for me, sometimes like Gage, we drove all the way up here. We're in middle of Ohio. You got 6 turnovers with 2 points. I don't know if I'm feeding you the rest of the way home, dude. Did you have that kind of mindset, or were you able to kind of use your coaching that you've had for years and just kind of tailor it to like being a dad?
Well, side note, I worked for a coach one time that we played bad up in Boston one time, and he told the kids he was going to feed them a brown bag lunch on the way home. And he went to a gas station and made the people behind the counter put their sandwiches in a brown bag and fed them a brown bag lunch on the way home because of how they played. So it's funny. To answer your question, no, I've never had an issue with that. And I know that comes across maybe as arrogant, and I that's not my intention. Here's why. When you coach college, and I was coaching college before I was married, and I was coaching college before I had kids, you sort of become impartial because you work so hard. You don't become a fan of teams. You just become a fan of coaches and the sport that you're involved in. And at the college level, because you get paid to win, you gain some perspective because you work so hard. And then an example I would give you is when I was coaching college basketball and Jace was born, he wanted to get into baseball. And he played basketball too. But I played baseball growing up and always liked the sport. And I was like, this is going to be a good thing. Let him play some other sports. And so I got out of coaching in 07, and Jace was 2 years old. And when he was 4, he played baseball for the first time. And it clicked. Like he's always been sort of a dude on a baseball field. I don't know why. He's just been blessed that way. And by the time he was 8, I quit coaching his teams. I said, I'd rather be early to the party of not coaching my kids than be late. And so I never had an issue with not coaching my kids. Reagan, I coached some of her AAU teams, but I quit doing that when she was in 6th grade. The only way we talk about it in the car on the way home is if they bring it up. And there's been times where Reagan's brought it up and I told her that I don't want to talk about it. If I've been guilty of being emotional because of a poor performance, recently it's been Reagan, and I give her a little bit of the silent treatment, and she can pick up on it. But that's because she doesn't want to hear what I'm thinking. you know? And so I'm protecting her from that. But Lori and I have always let our kids fight their own battles. I tell parents all the time, the space in your child's locker is their oxygen and it's not yours. So quit trying to hog it. You know, um, I have a philosophy on this. It's parenting is emotional. There's nothing more important than our kids. And they get into middle school and high school. We lose control over a period of their lives that, for the first time in their lives, can lead to success or failure. And we struggle with not being able to protect them from failure or elevate them during the success. We want to make sure that they get success or that they receive the failure in a way that we control for them. We want to protect them. And so we give up that control by letting someone else coach them. And I said something the other day on a podcast, parents lose perspective during this time of their child's lives. And they usually regret it when that child is no longer playing sports and they're an adult and they're a productive member of society, and they look back and they're telling somebody else that's a younger parent, hey, look, I've been there, done that, don't do that, because they look back and they say, I wish I would have handled that differently. I'm proud of Lori Beth and I for not really having a lot of those moments. And I think the reason why was because the perspective I had in college coaching, and then her trusting me to handle it that way. Because there's been times that she wanted to be emotional too. And I said, no, we're not going to handle it that way. And she trusted that. And now we're both very laid back parents, whether our kids win, lose, play well, play poorly, it's on to the next event, You have to take the emotional attachment. There in my coaching, we talk about low attachment, high intention. You have to have low attachment to your child's successes and failures in sports, but also if they ace a biology exam or fail a history exam. You have to have low attachment to their successes and failures, but you have to have high intention, high levels of intent of making sure that you are parenting them in a healthy, holistic way through those events. You can't parent a child in a judgmental way when they succeed or when they fail in some endeavor. You have to parent a child with almost an emotionalist state, leaving the judgment out of it. Okay? Man, that's hard to do because we're human beings and we were designed with emotion. It takes discipline, and it takes times of probably screwing it up to learn not to screw it up anymore. I'm sure that you've had moments where you look back and like, I was overly emotional in that game and I regret that. I've never seen a coach, and I'm guilty of this, very guilty of this. You've seen me coach. I don't ever make my best decisions when I'm mad. I may illustrate a point in a colorful way that resonates. That doesn't mean it was the best decision. So same thing as a parent, why do we want to try to make impactful decisions at critical moments when we're our most emotional? Doesn't make sense. We have to regulate that emotion by having low attachment to the result, but high intention on the process of how we parent them in moments that lead to the result. Jace, you just booted a ground ball in the bottom of the ninth, with bases loaded. Am I going to parent him based on the mistake? Or am I going to parent him on reframing that so he's stronger from it going into the next game? Low attachment to the error that was made, but high intention to the process that leads to strength down the road.
Well, that's perfect. And I know you put that was in a question there. I know you put that low attachment. I was going to ask, so I'm glad we went ahead and dipped into that. No, that makes sense. And yeah, definitely I can sit back now and be like, man, what was I thinking? And now to every coach's defense out there, and I don't want to get so much on coaching. When you're coaching any coach at any level, I'm sure, and maybe you could say I'm wrong, but some of the stuff, some of my animations or some of my emotions, it's extra to get eyes, to get their eyes, to get their ears. It's not truly, I don't truly feel that exact way as I may be expressing it. What I've noticed, and I have not become one, but I see it. And I'm like, guys, now let me help explain this to you. But from a parent's perspective, especially with coaching, they can hear everything a coach, people will sit behind the bench just to hear everything that coach says. I don't want to be there. I've been that person. And they like transcribe every bit of audio you give to the kids, good or bad, but mostly it's in those rough moments. And I just think I don't think parents realize how many hours when you do make those mistakes of being too emotional or you take it south a little bit. There's been nights I've come home after coaching middle school basketball and not slept the whole night, like literally replayed my emotions, replayed my words, apologized in my head, or rather if I was in the right or wrong, but just like, and been like, man, I cared so much about that kid. And do they really think I think this of them? So I don't think that parents understand. If you haven't coached, I don't think a parent, you understand how much that emotional toll has on a coach when you go home. Like when I go home, I beat myself up over some of the things that I've said. Um, and so I've learned in my short amount of time of like, the tongue is very powerful, through coaching, through your career, through your parenting. And sometimes you have to be very intentional, with what you allow to come out of your mouth.
Well, a biblical truth that applies to coaching is the tongue reflects the heart, to your point. As a matter of fact, I help coaches that want to build cultures of champions, or championship cultures, I should say, to develop their own mission and vision statement. And part of that is having standards. And one of our standards at Montgomery County and at Ashland was we were going to control our tongue. The tongue reflects our heart. So we weren't going to use profanity and things of that nature. Now, do we all slip up? Yes. Have we all, as a coach, I've had those moments too, especially as a young coach. I'll give you a story. I was at Rose Hill coaching my first year at Ashland. And it was first semester. I had just come out of college coaching. I was the interim head coach at Kentucky Wesleyan, one of the winningest programs, the winningest program in Division II history, home to 8 national championships. And it was an emotional recovery. You know, I wanted the job after the interim year. I didn't get it. And I was still struggling with that and still trying to find my place as a high school coach, still wondering if this is how bad did I fail from a high school coach? I was dealing with all these self-esteem issues and self-identity issues as a coach. And it was early first semester of my first year at Ashland. And I was still coaching those kids like I coached the kids at Kentucky Wesleyan and Valdosta State, which was with a profane tongue, which was very personal. I mean, there's things I've said to kids that I'll have to answer for at St. Peter's desk at check-in in heaven one day.
I believe it.
So I was still coaching them that same way. And we're at Rose Hill one night, and they were a district opponent, and they weren't a very good team. They had great kids, had great coaches, and it's a special school. They're in Ashland, but they weren't ready to compete with us. They knew that. We're up 8 at halftime, and we might as well have been down 40 in my mind. And I had a halftime tirade that is legendary in all the group text messaging with all those kids. Those kids were all on our undefeated teams. They win, and they're like sons to me now. You know, I've been to weddings, and I mean, we love them. They're part of our family, every one of them. But I said some things I'm not very proud of at that halftime. So profane and so loud and obnoxious that we're at Rose Hill. The home team's locker room was adjacent to ours. They could hear it through the cinder blocks, through the wall. The kids got scared, and the coach took them out of their own locker room early to get on the floor because he didn't want them to hear everything I was telling our kids. Okay? So obviously he reported that to my superintendent the next morning and my AD, and I got called to the red carpet for it. And, you know, I regretted that moment. I was not a good version of myself. No, we won the game by 32, I think. Okay. And they responded. But are you going to tell me that there wasn't a better way for them to respond than me losing my religion over that? And so that was the beginning of a period of my life as a coach where I had to find homeostasis. I had to find that balance point, that baseline of who I was as a child of God, as a husband, as a father, and as a coach. And I can't wear this hat as a coach with habits that don't reflect the clothes that I'm supposed to wear as a Christian, as a husband, and as a father. I can't have my daughter hear this profane word when she's 3 to these kids that play a sport that she loves and she wants to play one day, and then come home and say, well, honey, I was just talking to them, but you're not supposed to use that same language, and you won't hear me use that language to you. What kind of example is that? It was mixed signals. And so by Christmas of that year, I had started to find that point, and I became a much better coach. And it took coaching at a lower level, a high school level, for me to find that. And it took those kids being patient with me and having some understanding and forgiveness. But it worked. We went to the state tournament that year, made it to the Elite Eight on a team that was 500 going in the state tournament, one of the worst records ever for a team going to state tournament. Okay. But we just figured it out. And that was part of the reason why is they saw a coach that they could believe in finally. I wasn't that coach for them. And so as a parent, we're going to have those moments where we regret, we say things we don't mean, or we say things I don't like that. When you say something that, quote, I didn't mean it, you meant it at the time. Okay. I said something that I meant at that time, and I regret saying it, and I regret meaning it. Okay. And here, please forgive me for that. So we have those moments as parents too. We have those moments as husbands. And I think you have to lead your family as the father at times through transparency, vulnerability, seeking forgiveness.
I didn't mean it that way. That's a good call out there, because you're right. If we said it, we probably meant it. But to have the conviction of wishing I didn't mean it. Perfect example there. Just get on a little side tangent is Gage has his permit. Obviously, he's been in boot. He's finally out of the boot. He's driving.
I didn't know that. I'm going to stay off the sidewalks for a while. Sorry, Gage, but I don't trust you behind the wheel.
Well, not only that, he's driving my wife's Yukon Denali XL. So, first off, last Sunday at church, I was like, man, I want to write down some I want to be a doer. My biggest conviction right now, or what I feel like I'm being led to do, is call myself out and also challenge others to that Sunday energy that we get. Transfer over to Monday, that through the rest of the week, Monday through Saturday. And so I've been very direct. Wrote down kind of my prayers, wrote down specific things I want to be direct with, and one of them was, Lord, please allow me to have patience with my children the way you have patience with me as a father and a husband and a child of God. That was kind of my thing, because we have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old running around here, a 6-year-old, and then the 15-year-old. They all have so many demanding needs in so many different ways, and sometimes I lose my mind. Made it through the week was going very well. Been great with the little kids. Gage wanted to go watch the game the other night. Had at B-Dubs, and he's had a few parking issues, so he's already sweating. And there's a car, and there's 5 open spots. I can already tell by the way he drives great, drives good on the interstate, does all this stuff, but parking, he sucks. Sorry, Gage. Love you. We're getting better. He kind of tiptoes around and then pulls in and parks in between 2 spots. And immediately, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, just freaking out. All the kids are in the car. My wife's in the car. Back up, do it again. We will turn back on the road. We'll come back and park. Backing up. He's nervous. People are watching now. He's aggravated. He backs up, pulls right back the same way. Backs up, pulls back the same way. Instead of teaching him or being patient with him and correcting and showing him, hey, cut the wheel this way, I'm lashing out. And immediately, then he parks, my adrenaline goes down. And I'm so embarrassed. Just what, what am I doing? Like, my little kids are in the car. My wife's here. Now, everybody just sits and when I go on my little spiels, everybody just sits and kind of takes it. But I just felt so bad. And I kept apologizing to him. And he said, Dad, I just wish you wouldn't he's like, I'm just trying to learn to park. And I just was like, man, like, I gotta tighten some things up. And it's just like, as a parent, sometimes I fall guilty, and I'm not gonna make this about me because I got my whole podcast. I never had anybody push me or motivate me, and I feel like sometimes with my children, I overdo it to show them that I'm doing it,
Hmm.
and it completely
It's a powerful thought.
bites me in the tail though sometimes because I'm not doing it with ill intent, and I've been able to kind of manage it as I mature. I'll manage it and take it away, but the way I use my mouth, the way I use my tongue that night, it made dinner awkward for a little bit. And then it also bothers me that my 15-year-old son has to come over. He's like, hey, Dad, it's okay. Like, I'm okay now. Like, it's good. Like, I don't want him to have to be the emotional, mature one in between the two of us to make things normal again.
One of the pieces of advice that I give parents is when you're in a situation like you just described, go ahead and fast forward your child into parenthood. So in your example, Gage, all right, your son just parked this car this way. How are you going to handle this as his father? Do you think he's going to say, oh, I'm going to be fine with it? No, he's going to realize it was wrong. It was incorrect. Are you going to make him do it again? Yeah, probably. All right. Do it again. You know, and anytime we can allow them to have anytime that we can allow them to have success independently, like if you'd have got out of the car, everybody got out of the car, and he's got to do this on his own, that builds a lot of confidence, and he probably exponentially grows in his confidence in his ability to park by doing it on his own, you know. But you're right. Those I think every parent goes through those times when their child is. Reagan is got to take her test to get her permit here soon. We're waiting on her. Of course, we're great parents. We lost a birth certificate, so we're waiting on the copy of that to come back, and then so she can go take her test. She's been practicing in our cars, but sometimes you just say, all right, you're the father of you. You're the mother of you. What do you tell the child you right now? It takes the pressure off you to be right. It puts the pressure on them to parent themselves, you know, and in them parenting themselves, you've done a heck of a job as the parent. So I thought that was good advice that was given to me a long time ago. And I recommend to people use that questioning technique from time to time.
Briefly ask you a little bit in the question about your dad. That he's pretty solid Christian, over-the-road trucker, provider. What are some qualities that you would say? I know you listed that, obviously your mom and even your in-laws played a role in still shaping you, but what are some qualities that you say, okay, this is my dad's DNA in me?
My dad is 79 years old, and last week he's retired, but he works in retirement. Go to a car dealership and you want to buy it. You go to a car dealership, you want to buy a vehicle. They don't have it, but they can get it for you from somewhere else. My dad's a guy that takes a chase car and another driver, and they go get the car, bring it back. Or somebody else in another state says, hey, I want this, but it's at a dealership in Kentucky. That dealer, they call the dealership in Kentucky, and my dad comes and gets it and takes it out of state to that person. Okay. So he does that in retirement now. He was a truck driver for, I believe, 43 years. He was a car hauler, so he knows car dealerships. He hauled cars from the plant of which they were made in to the dealerships. So I was born and raised in Cincinnati because in Norwood, there was the Camaro fiber plant. When it shut down late 80s, the Toyota plant in Georgetown was coming online. So that's why we moved to Scott County when I was in high school, because my dad's terminal, we were either going to Fort Wayne, Indiana, or we were going to Georgetown, Kentucky. And so we chose Georgetown. So that's why we moved there. But he did that. And it's the heaviest tractor trailer on the road outside of heavy loads, those hazmat, special circumstances, especially when it's loaded. but he doesn't have a sleeper cab. So he stayed in a hotel room every night. So he was an over the road truck driver, and he was very good at it. Had one of the best safety records in the country for his industry. He grew to top in seniority at his terminal and trained drivers, and just was a mentor to a lot of truck drivers, car haulers specifically over the years, and was a good person. I became a Christian before my dad did. So it was normal when I was young, up until I was 8, for my mom to wake us up, take us to church on Sunday morning, and my dad would sleep in because, that was the one night morning he could sleep in and he didn't want to go to church. And when I was 8, he had a radical salvation. Um, I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful thing. And my dad is just a dynamic Christian man. But I always respected how hard he worked. I mean, it was every week, every month, every year, grinding out, logging miles. And my mom didn't have to work because of how hard he worked. The first thing I take away from my father is that there's no secret to success. You got to work your butt off. And there's beauty in the mundane. And he did the same thing week after week, but did it to the best of his ability, took pride in it. And he was very successful in his small part of the world. The second thing that I've taken from him is, in retirement, he's staying busy. Now, he ain't just sitting on a lazy boy watching Fox News every day. That's not what he's doing. Now, he likes to do that when he is home. But, he's out working. So last week alone, he was in North Dakota or South Dakota and Florida. 2 separate trips, pretty much going to the Gulf and Canada, And why? Because it keeps him busy. And he calls it his grandkid money. I've really grown to respect how he's keeping himself busy, keeping his mind busy, keeping his body busy, even when he doesn't have to. My dad's a worker, man, and he takes pride in his work. So that's probably the number one thing I've taken from him. And then, he is just so proud, even though, Paul tells us in the Bible that we're not supposed to, if we're going to boast of anything, we need to boast in our sufferings for Christ. But I'm proud of how strong of a Christian my dad is. And, he shares his faith with anybody that'll listen to him. So he's a good man, and he's a great granddad. My kids love their grandparents.
That's awesome. So with him being gone a lot, how was that? We don't have to stay in it too long, but so I'm assuming your mom did most of the traditional stuff. When he was home, though, other than you say working, but when he was home, when you were a kid, was he actively like engaged with you, like you all did all the things, or was it, I'm home, I need to?
Well,
I know times are different as
to
well.
be, like we talked about earlier, you have to be obsessed with winning, wedded to winning in the process. So my dad was obsessed with being the best truck driver at his terminal, and he was wedded to his job. And so that required sacrifice. And I can't, as a child of his, I can't complain that he wasn't home when the things that we had, we didn't need for anything when I was a kid. Now, we weren't wealthy, but we weren't poor either. We were probably above average middle class. And 100% because of truck driver's salary, So, there's no free ice cream, so to speak. But my mom, had me in, sports and piano and orchestra, did the clothes shopping and the grocery shopping. She cooked every night for us and, would take her turn in carpooling. I lived in a great neighborhood. We had enough kids to play a football game all within the same 2 years of age of each other in my neighborhood. We could play baseball games, basketball games, football games, and we were all like either one level higher or lower grade wise. So we were all within like 2 years of age of each other. And so we all played sports, and my mom would carpool when it was her turn. And it was just a very Americana kind of life in suburban Cincinnati. I was afforded that luxury, because it was a luxury now looking back, because of the work ethic that my dad had. But when he was home, it was so powerful, him coming home, that I remember the minute part of those experiences. Friday nights, Dukes of Hazzard was on at 8 o'clock, and I knew sometime during that episode he was usually going to come home, you know? And so why is Dukes of Hazzard one of my all-time favorite shows? I think subconsciously because I associated with my dad coming home on those week-long trips. He would come to sporting events when I played on the weekends, baseball games on Saturdays, basketball games on Saturdays, and things of that nature. But, he never coached me. I think he was like an assistant soccer coach when I was like 6 or something. I don't know. But, he never coached me. My mom never coached me. And, I don't know if it was intentional on their part or not, but it was also the 80s where parents didn't have near as much a voice as they do right now in sports and school sports. So, they let me compete, and I was in football. I wasn't very good. They never complained that I didn't get much playing time. Basketball was pretty good. Baseball was really good, but they never, I had to fight my own battles. So that's probably another reason, Michael, why we have parented that way is because I was parented that way, in large part. So, um, yeah, I had a good upbringing, man. I was blessed to have good parents.
That's awesome. That's good. And we want to hear that. And I'm sure people watching want to hear that because, all this, the fatherhood is shaped by so many different outlets, and not every story has to be, tragic, or not every story has to be bad. Like it's also nice to sit down with somebody that, hey, I had a mom and a dad. My dad worked, mom took care of things. We had a good life. Like that's an accomplishment. It's still, you can take what you learned there and go with your own kids and shape life that way. And I know you said you were independent since 18. Is there anything with your kids? Is there like in your mind, is there like a set age where they're like, okay, hey, when you guys leave the nest, you're gone, or how does that?
I don't think we're going to predetermine that.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to sort of go with the flow. I think Reagan would go to University of Hawaii if she could. Jace would probably want to stay closer to home, but who knows? But I mean, when I say I was independent at 18, I lived out of the house when I was 8 by the time I was a freshman in college. Not in a dorm. I had an apartment. I went to Georgetown College. I lived illegally in a dorm for a semester. So a guy stole me a key and let me live with him for a while. But I tried to pay my rent with my work study checks and finding, stuff like that. But, when I wasn't totally independent, if I ran into a snag, my mom and dad would be there to help me. But I mean, I had to pay, when I was in high school, Michael, this is crazy. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. And I don't think my parents made me do this. I think it was just I saw my dad's work ethic. So I think it just sort of like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. But when I was in high school, the internet was a new thing. All right. I'm 49. I'll be 50 April 1st. All right. And there was this thing called hyperlinks where you would create these buttons and you would click it and it would go to a dial. It would take 5 minutes for the, all that crazy sound. And the website would come and it would go, but, the picture would gradually, line by line, show up on your screen. And it was the coolest thing. I would go to school at 7 a.m. and learn how to create hyperlinks and learn about this thing called the internet. This would have been 1992. Okay. And so that was a elective that I chose to get up earlier and go to school and learn. Then I had school, and then I had practice. Usually it was basketball, but I also played football, golf, and other sports various times through my career. In Cincinnati, I was a water polo. I played water polo. And then after practice, I either went and I managed, as a 16-year-old, I either managed a truck wash, a semi-tractor trailer truck wash, big bay where the whole tractor trailer pulls in, and I had to wash it. And it was awful. Like we were using hydrochloric acid without masks and gloves and stuff, cleaning these wheels and the smoke pipes and the gas tanks and to shine them up. I mean, it was probably an OSHA violation, just screaming to be written up. But I was, I would, and the interesting days were the cattle trailers that would come in. You'd have to clean those out in the back, or I was a youth manager. There was a title for a Winn-Dixie in Georgetown, and the youth manager got to learn how to operate all the different departments, the dairy, the frozen foods, the deli. I couldn't cut meat or anything like that with the butchers because I wasn't old enough. The checkout, the bagging, the carts, and all that kind of produce. And so I had this sort of white collar job in the grocery. Then I had this blue collar job. And then my dad fooled me one time. He said, "Look, I got a job. You can make some money. You're going to make as much money as you want to make. Depends how hard you work. But it's cutting tobacco." I'm like, "So how much can I?" Well, you put about 5 or 6 stalks on a stick, and then you get paid per stick. I'm like, "So if I hustle, dude, he got me on that one, man. That was some hard work." But I was doing those things when I was 15, 16 years old. 2 jobs, going to school early, and playing sports. And so I would not get home until midnight. And then in the summers, I would get up at 4:30 and I would go inventory the cars at Toyota for his trucking terminal. I would say, okay, that when they get a load a car onto a tractor trailer, it's by the VIN number. Well, I would go down all these rows of parked cars that just came out of the plant within the last 48 hours, and I would write the VIN numbers down. And I would say, okay, VIN number, XYZ is in row A, column 16. And so the drivers, when they would come to load, they would know exactly where their cars were. It helped them. And my dad's boss paid me to do that. And I would do that at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes before I would even go to school. And so I was working. And then when I was 18, I started my own landscaping business out of the pickup truck that I had. So I think subconsciously, I don't think my parents ever said, "You have to go get a job," but they said you had to pay your insurance on your truck. We'll make the payment, but you're paying the insurance. I had a pager. I was one of the first young people to get a pager. You had to pay your pager payment, I just think subconsciously I saw the work ethic in my family, and I thought, it was a natural byproduct that rubbed off on me.
I obviously didn't have the parental upbringing, but as far as having to go out and be independent early on, that was me. I don't know about other dads or parents out there. I'm in this phase right now where I don't want I don't want Gage to have to go work because he has to. I want him to be able to focus on his things, but I also don't want him to be think that that's life. So I'm in this weird spot with parenting where it's like, I want you to be independent. I want you to find ways to get money. I want you to engage your brain to be creative, to find income. But I don't want you to feel like I can't play basketball. I can't play football. I got to do this because I got to work. Because in my head, that when I was younger, I was like, oh, as soon as my kids turn 15 or 16, they're working. That's what I had to do. That's what he needs to do. I'm like, I don't really want him to. I don't want him to do that, but I want him to want to find ways to cognitively explore entrepreneurship, or like just reach out and find something to do that makes you some money, because you're going to need it, because I'm not funding everything.
I think kids need to learn how to do physical labor more. Fortunately, my son likes physical labor. He wants to work with his hands one day. He wants to probably go into a trade or construction management or something like that. Reagan, she is definitely going to lead, use her cognitive abilities, her personality. She's really smart. Both our kids are really driven, but they're different. There's times I think Jace has a lot more common sense than Reagan. There's days that maybe it's flipped. It just depends. I'm not going to force them to do that, but as a coach, to get a job, that is, as a coach, one of the things I often struggled with was prohibiting kids from getting jobs to get that practical real world experience because of the programming that our basketball program required, especially in the summers. I didn't like taking that option away from them, but if they went ahead, they could say, "Coach, I'm not doing anything with you this summer. I'm going to go work." And I couldn't do anything to stop them. Okay. But if they did, they were probably losing a spot because somebody else was out working them. So that competitive environment sort of kept them engaged with us instead of going to get a job. And, it's just, there's really no right way to navigate that. And I always sort of struggled with that, but that's just part of winning. It's funny you say that because I don't want you to miss football practice because you got to go work at Kroger's. Well, I agree. I don't think he should miss football practice because he's got to go work at Kroger's, but is there a workaround to where he can get real world experience earning a paycheck in some form or fashion, yet not sacrifice the programming that he has, whether it's extracurricular, athletic, academic, whatever it is. That's a tricky situation at times.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, and I think you've had a few players I know just from here that have had those summer jobs, and one of them seems to be doing just fine.
I let Dawson. I said, Dawson, take the summer off, and the only time I've ever done that was with Luke. Because he was injured, he couldn't play, and But I was feeling that Doss needed a mental reset, and Doss wants to be a lineman, utility lineman, and so he's going to work with his hands and be a blue collar guy. That's what he wants to do. He's going to be great at it. He's going to make good money doing it. And I said, go. So he worked on a flag crew for Walker Construction this summer out in the hot sun. He came back with refreshed, reset, and looked at basketball in a different light because he'd been out there on that hot asphalt in 100-degree days. And this basketball thing, this is a pretty good gig. I don't need to, lose this thing right now. It's a pretty good gig for me. So it was a good decision to let him do that.
And I know, unfortunately, you're not there right now to get to see that, but that is and I don't know him personally, don't know his mom personally, but yeah, but he is a different. I'm sure any of your coaches that are still there would tell you. I've never seen the kid move the way he moves, other than this year. Like he is, spin moves up and up, just doing this stuff. I'm like, I didn't know Dawson had that in his bag. So you can see that there's been like a mental reset there for him. And I think some kids need that, or young men, anybody just needs to say, okay, I'm going to go out and get this. And then sometimes you go and get that. And maybe there's some success, but then you come back and you can appreciate where you currently are.
We just, as parents, we can't shepherd our kids through everything. We can always be there, but we don't need to always be there. We can always be there, be available. One of the best things we can do as a parent is be available for our kids. But we don't always have to be there. And we got to learn to give up that control. So an example of that would be we tell our kids the coach is always right even when he's wrong. The coach is always right even when she's wrong. What that tells them is that your coach is going to get it wrong sometimes. But the way you're going to respond to that is, I got to do it anyhow. And I wish more parents would have that blind faith in a coach because, we're not perfect. But as parents, the same thing applies. I'm your father. She's your mother. We're not always going to get it right. But when the parent is always right, even when they're wrong, I think that's a good way to parent. But, at the same time, we have to be transparent. We have to be vulnerable. We have to ask for forgiveness when we are wrong. But we've got to raise our children to obey us. That is very biblical. And I don't think, I think a lot of people, they quit. Oh, this is about being a father, right? Well, I still have my father. And I'm a father. The Bible doesn't say you can stop obeying your parents when you're 50. Okay? The Bible's clear that we're to obey our parents. So as a father, we need to make sure our children are obeying us. As a son, I still have to obey my parents. I think as we get our own families, get married and have children, we sometimes lose sight of that and we think that we know more than our parents. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I have a lot of conviction that I'm working through. I don't know if it's conviction or if it's discernment. Obviously, somebody with no parents and trying to find the whether it's me making it up, but trying to find that asterisk or those parentheses around, you know, respect the mother and father. Like I
Are
don't
your
know.
parents still living?
So both my parents are living. I've met my dad when I was 17. I actually reached out to him on social media to come on this podcast and just talk and hash things out. Maybe not for me and not for him, but just for maybe there's a 17-year-old boy sitting in eh, struggling right now that maybe our conversation could help. So I reached out to him, and my mom lives in Phoenix. Very high risk lifestyle, just not good shape. And so I've just been struggling from the parents. For me at 36, I can't figure out the parent thing as far as my biblical requirement to, am I fine? Like my mom is almost homeless at this point. Am I supposed to be financially supporting that? Because I know when I do that, it also comes with that money could go elsewhere. Yeah, I forgive my father, but I don't know. And it's something I probably need to talk to a pastor about at some point in
Look
time.
at when they're no longer here, what baggage would you rather carry? Would you rather carry the baggage of regret? It's not about being right or wrong. It's about love. And so would you rather have the baggage of regret that, you know what, all I had to do was reach out, and even if they didn't respond in kind, I'm at peace knowing that I would have been at peace knowing that I tried. Okay? Or do you want the baggage of confidence that you did the right thing and you reached out and you communicated and bygones are bygones, water was underneath the bridge, and you moved on? I think there's power in that second one, but it goes against everything that we as humans, especially as men, have. It's called pride, you know? And I was reading, I wrote a devotion 2 days ago, I think. We do not have to repay. So, for example, look at my recent situation where I resigned from coaching because of some people took 19-month-old text messages that technically were a violation of bylaws that had technically already been discussed and nothing came of, and wanted to flare them back up to harm me and our program. And they did. They succeeded. Okay. As humans, as men, we want to repay them in kind. So if you punch me in the nose, I'm going to punch you at least back in the nose. Okay. Or do we repay them with kindness? Okay. And it's hard to do the second one, but that is the way that the Christ-like version of ourselves, that's how we need to respond, because that's how we respond with love. You can respond with love without opening your wallet to somebody, even if they're your family. But I think responding with kindness versus by responding kind allows you to one day have peace versus regret. And the way you parent your family now, I've already seen you're not going to have those issues from your kids, you know? Um, but I think, and I'm not counseling you, don't take it the wrong way, but like if you can figure this out as your role as a son, it's going to make you that much better of a father.
I'm gonna be honest with you, that's a role I have. I mean, I tell everybody like I have a so proud of you son card that I got. I got that last year from my in-laws. It's the first card that's ever said son to me. So I don't know that role, the responsibilities that come with it. And I'm not, and I'm not sitting here pity partying myself. I just don't know those roles. So I think I think to better myself as a father, I'm going to have to take some time, especially now I've kind of put myself out here in this world here like this. I'm going to have to take some time and try to revisit that lane and figure out how I can to navigate that just to better my own family, my wife, my kids, and
You know, Michael, there's a difference between forgetting and forgiving.
100% yes.
And not forget. Now, that doesn't mean that you hold a grudge. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us not to hold grudges. Um, Specifically says that. But I don't think God created you to forget things that harmed you when you were younger. I think you were created to forgive, because the grace that you have in your life as a child of God is you did not earn. You were chosen and you were given that freely. So who are you to think that you can't treat other people in the same way? You know? But it's hard because we're sinful people. You know? As parents, people don't realize this. It's easier to judge your children than it is people that aren't your children. It's easier to judge a member of your family than it is to judge people that are not in your family, because you think you're entitled to judge your children. You think you're entitled to judge your family. But whether you're judging your son or whether you're judging somebody that you just saw at Kroger that you have no idea what their name is, never seen before, but they didn't put their cart back in the cart corral, okay? Who are you to do that?
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree, and I definitely, especially with my dad, we just didn't have a connection. So I've learned to forgive him. I miss things, and I forgive him, and then I'll talk about it, and then I won't. But ultimately, what I speak and my mind and my mouth sometimes say different things, but in my heart and in my God, I've forgiven him, and I want to get the chance to tell him that.
You need to.
And I think it'll help, and not even for me or him. Like I said, I think somebody else seeing that could change a life or spare one at this point.
It's easy to say. You know, how you parent your children will be how they parent their children. You know, there's a lot of things that are easy to say that we want to be real and meaningful. We have to be careful in quotes and sayings, because sometimes it'll make us justify hiding things from ourselves that we've always hidden from ourselves. And we have to be careful. I think one of the most powerful traits as a father, as a husband, as a man, is the ability to be self-aware. When you get fired from public positions like I have been, if you're not self-aware and you're not vulnerable and you're not transparent and you don't take ownership, it can go south very quickly for you. I had a buddy of mine who was a superintendent at the time. He no longer is a superintendent, but up in Northern Kentucky, and he called me. He used to coach with me, and he said, the smartest thing for you to do is to shut up. I said, even if you were done wrong, even if you're a victim, even if you were set up, which I was set up. We had 3 death threats. I mean, it was bad. Talked to several lawyers. I mean, it was a surreal part of it. My wife was going through cancer. It was a surreal a time in our lives, I should say. He said, the best thing for you to do is to shut up. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, I got caught on an open mic one time in a public meeting saying something I shouldn't have said. And here's what $25,000 of public relations consulting taught me. And I'm going to say what he said, but I'm going to abbreviate because it was a cuss word. He said, shut the F up. And then right when you've done that enough, continue to do it. And right when you think it's past and you might want to slip out and say something to justify or make yourself feel better, nope, continue to shut the F up. Because when you put out that, when you try to justify what you did, when you play the role of victim, all that's going to happen is people are going to take it out of context and twist it, and you're going to hurt yourself even more. That is so hard to do because we want people to know our version of the truth. You know? Well, that's why it's our version. There's bias to it. There's always 2 sides. You know, this recent example at Montgomery County, our superintendent had legitimate reasons for feeling the way he did about what happened. Legitimate reasons. Very legitimate reasons. Okay? That's why you haven't had me come out and say, you know, he or she is an idiot. No, because they're not. They're good people. Okay. So I choose to say nothing. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't stand for things, and God wants us to have convictions in our lives. So I'm at a time in my life now where I'm not an employee of a public school district, and I'm at peace whether I coach again or not. So now I have a different platform where I'm not citing that I was a victim. I'm not citing that I was set up. I'm not citing, no, I'm actually talking more about the mistakes I made. And I'm actually citing now things that I think where I can advocate for coaches, parents, school systems in a way that I've never been able to because I wouldn't have had the stones to say it as a public school employee, you know? And so there's times in our life when we should take advantage of speaking up and saying things. But I don't think when we are in trouble, when we're being persecuted in whatever form or fashion that is, I think there's wisdom in just be still. You don't have to prove that you're right. Okay? Because when you prove you're right, you're going to try to prove your truth and not the whole truth. So just stay quiet. And it's hard because people throw darts at you. They say things that are not true. They make assumptions that are hurtful. They start rumors that affect your family. And there's not much that we haven't seen in my family from this. And so we've gotten calloused to it. But I think there's wisdom in just saying, so what? Now what?
Oh, that's good advice. Yeah, I couldn't imagine, for your wife and the kids and stuff. You hear about those things, I guess, but until you live through them, it's got to be hard to kind of in the beginning. You said now you're callous, but it's got to be hard in the beginning. Like, did you feel? And I'm not even talking Montgomery County. We can talk Ashland. We can just talk in general as a father. Does guilt, whether you're right or wrong, does the emotional strain and wear on your family, does it put a guilt on you that you've had to work through it all, or
Ashland, yes. Montgomery County, no. Because I saw how my wife viewed what happened, and she was 100% behind me. Um, it's even though there's not much. I mean, in both cases, I never, gave anybody money or gave anybody a car or a house or those rumors are out there. But like, we didn't do anything illicit. There was no paying for this, paying for, and none of that. And that's never happened ever. Um, so this time around, she's like, you know what? Screw it. You were trying to help a mom and a kid in need. And there were some circumstances that because so and so was out of town and this had that, you were just doing what you thought was right. And she said, I love you for it. And so that allowed me not to feel a guilt. I wish that it would have been looked at that way by other people. And we never even got the kid. I mean, the best thing for him is to go to the school that he went to. But I wish them, the mom and him, nothing but the best, and I would never do anything to fight this that would harm that kid or that mom. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not a rat, never going to be a rat. It's not who I am. But to see my wife and kids be like, Dad, you were just doing what you thought your heart would. You just did what your heart told you to do. Now, does that mean it could have been a mistake? Yes, yes. But let me give you some perspective. Do you think I'm going to be judged by my Lord and Savior for sending an unenrolled kid text messages to help his mother find housing? No. Now, are we supposed to obey worldly laws and rules? Yes. Did I break a rule? Yes. Have I tried to say that I didn't? No. I did. Okay. But I can break a rule and still maintain my faith and growth as a Christian man and not regret breaking a rule.
yeah, I think that's in even just outside your situation, it shouldn't be as hard to. I think we're in a world, we're in a time right now where we care what everybody thinks, or for the, I hate to put everybody, I hate to use words we and most, but for the sake of the argument, I'm going to. But I just think we're in a time where, unfortunately, that's society where we're more concerned with what our neighbors thinks or our peers thinks than our creator.
Perception.
It's a scary place to be. I've fallen guilty of it at times in my life. I can say now that that's not where I'm at, and it's the freedom or the weight that comes off your shoulder. And it's not like an arrogant, I don't care what you think of me thing. It's just that I know at the end of the day, you don't, you're not stamping my go or no go.
At the end of the day, it's a self-esteem issue. I have always lived my life up until about a month ago, about a month and a half ago, paying attention to the perception that people were going to have of me as a coach and my program and my family. I don't care. And the reason I don't care now is because my faith in God is as strong as it's ever been. My Bible time, it's going on an hour and a half a day now. My prayer journal, and I'm not bragging. I'm not. I
No,
don't mean that
I
as a
know.
brag. I got a daily devotion that's out. It's part of my website now for my business. So I'm structuring a bit. My tagline for Cognitive Texture is rooted in faith, built by discipline, designed for performance. First thing, rooted by faith. So I'm starting a business based on my faith. And so who am I to be? I mean, the Bible talks to us about being meek. Okay. And there are times in our life where we have to be meek. We need to put others ahead of ourselves. We have to be selfless. Sometimes in love and in serving, you have to be meek. Yet coaching, the best coaches I know are meek because they put their players above themselves. Okay. But we're also created and designed to be powerful and exemplary. Okay. Can you be both? Yes. Jesus was maybe the most meek person to ever walk the face of the earth, but he was definitely the most powerful as well. You know what I'm saying? So as humans, we struggle to balance those.
Yeah, I know. I think I checked out you posted a little quick read, and I read into it. I'm not enough to sit here and tell you I memorize it right now, but and it was kind of just the balancing act of faith versus works, and how one without the other is no bueno. So yeah, I was definitely staying tuned to that, and I think that's just I can see. I don't want to be like I can feel, but I can see that you have more peace than, and I haven't known you for a very long time, but there's a different peace
There
that's
is.
over you, and it's visible. So I want you to know from one
Thank you for
Christian to another,
saying that, by the way.
it is visible, and it's not an arrogant. Has somebody ever looked at you maybe on stage and be like, "Oh man, it's a arrogant, cocky dude"?
Oh,
Maybe,
yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
from there's something about you right now that I will say is there's a peace. So whether my encouragement's anything to you or not, I encourage you to continue to do what you're doing because it's radiating just here. So I think that, if that stays with your business and everything, I think that's going to be awesome.
So we're serving our church. The theme for this year is be the church. The church is not a building. It is physically, but the church was designed just to be a body of Christ, body of believers. And you and I are the
This is
church right
church
now.
right now.
Yes, exactly. So Pastor Kanoy's theme this year is be the church. And that message needs to resonate and radiate to all of us. We are justified as a child of God through faith. And that our ability to be a child of God comes with spiritual gifts, the same gifts that Jesus had and the Holy Spirit has. That's in the Bible. It's in Ephesians and Galatians. So we've got incredible tools as a Christian on this earth right now. And I think if a development of a Christian is scalable, 1 through 10, 1, I don't believe, 10, Joel Osteen, baby. You're just a super Christian, right? and I don't mean to diminish it. I'm just saying you're just, a Billy Graham figure. Okay. I think one of the areas that moves the needle on us becoming deeper and more, growing more, okay, aggressively as a Christian, is when we witness to other people about our faith. I believe there's quite a few Christians in this world that maybe even self-profess, maybe even go to church. I even stick their nose in their Bible. But are you having courageous conversations, people, especially non-believers, about Jesus? I think when we do that, man, that faith needle just moves to the other side. And what you did by praying for us and then welcoming us is a form of witnessing. And that is powerful. And I'll never forget when I was a teenager, I was very active in a youth group in Cincinnati. And our mission trip one summer was to Myrtle Beach. And there's this campground still there. It's called Lake something, Lake Point, Lake, I don't know what it's called, but it's a campground there on the beach, right near the Grand Stand or Strand, whatever it's called, Myrtle Beach. Campers, tents, RVs, it's a big old campground. And that's where we stayed. We camped out for a week. And every day after breakfast, we'd get up and we'd go to the beach. And we passed out what are called tracts, which are little pamphlets that describe how you can become a Christian and accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. And this was 1988-ish, 90-ish, okay? And the main reason I went is because there was a cute girl that was in our youth group that I liked. But literally, we're on the beach, and we're supposed to walk up to people and talk to them about Jesus. No way I'm doing that. I'm hanging out on the beach, right? Man, I actually found the courage one time to do that. And I invited them to a church service that we were having on a Wednesday night in a little amphitheater there on the beach. And they came. And I was like, whoa. I was like, okay. I felt movement in my soul from the Holy Spirit. Thursday, next day, after the church service, I bet you I witnessed to 60 people on the beach and passed out tracts. I was on fire. And man, when you do that, you develop a confidence in your faith in God that is just unshakable. And He will protect you and bless you and put you in environments that otherwise you would have never been in. So I would encourage all fathers as spiritual leaders of your households to share your faith publicly with people, because that will bring blessings in your life, that any promotion at work, any salary increase, any vacation that's really nice that you can afford to pay for, any new car, any of the stuff of this earth that says success cannot do.
I had to step out, especially with Gage, and just be like, look, or anybody I talk to, I live an imperfect life daily. I sin daily. I pray daily. I want to walk the right path. But if I wait until I have it all figured out,
You'll wait forever. You'll wait till you die.
Till I die. And how many people, how selfish of that is it of me, when I could have been the seed to so many people.
God didn't choose you. He chose us. Share it to us. You're special. You were created individually, as was I. But we were also created. That's why they call it the great, in Matthew, the great mission, where we're supposed to go proclaim God's word to the great commission, the Great Commission. Okay. The Great Commission. We're supposed to go tell others about Jesus. All right. And so, I think that's a good way to sort of wrap up, our talk about being a dad is you better start there. You better be a husband first, a father second. Okay. And do both those roles in the way that God has intended those roles to be fulfilled.
I think we went, got a little more faith based than I expected to, and that's what's most important though. So Grant and John, if you all see this, don't worry, we're not gunning for your jobs. I want to get John Duggins on here for sure, and then I'll work my way to Grant. And not even just as they're just great men to learn from. Like you talk about guys that have had to, they're pastors, like that's their career. Like you're allowed to mess up because you're a basketball coach. I'm allowed to mess up because I'm prior military. Like you don't have a faith magnoscope so per se on your life. Could you imagine being a pastor and then the pressure? People are watching for your children to mess up. People are watching for your kids to not live that lifestyle. So I would love to have them on just to talk what it's like being so rooted in your faith and raising your family up through faith in a spot. When I say in a spotlight, what I'm saying, just like in that faith-based spotlight where pastor's
You're
daughter,
judged.
yes, you're judged very heavily.
Yeah.
I think those would be some great guys. I appreciate you coming on. Before we get off here, let me move chat real quick. Before we get off here, I didn't get to tell you but the question. So a new segment that I'm going to introduce is from a storybook or from a storyline called Hear Your Storybooks. So they make these for dads, they make them for moms, grandmas, whatever. It's a good way to. It's kind of like a keepsake journal where maybe you didn't want to come on here and talk and share your story. Maybe you're not emotionally charged man, and so your kids don't know a lot about you. These are great books that kind of ask questions, and you can pass them on to your kids as you get older. So you're going to be the first one I do. But to end each episode now, I'm literally going to read one page or one question from here, and then now you got to answer it on the spot. So I kind of chose this one for you just because through the ebbs and flows of life. And so this question is, there's a quote that goes, it says, becoming and being a dad is a section. Pretty much all honest truth telling there is in the world is done by children. That's from Oliver Holmes. And so this question is, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself as a new father? I know it's probably very open-ended, but see what you can go with there. Let me restate it. No. You got it? Okay.
Make sure that your focus is on your marriage to your wife first and foremost. Lori and I went through marriage counseling when Jace was born, after Jace was born, before Reagan was born. So early in our marriage, early as parents. And I don't want to say I wasn't the best parent I could be because I viewed myself at times more as a dad than a husband. And the Bible doesn't say, leave your father and mother and go be a dad. It says, leave your father and mother and go be a husband. Right? So that role is important. And if you can solidify that, and that is stronger, as my granddad used to say, stronger than new rope, your role as a dad is going to be great. You're going to knock it out of the park. But if your marriage is on the rocks, your ability to parent and be a father will also be shaky. And there was a guy that told me, I don't know who told it to me, one time he said, there's 3 things that you've got to make sure the boxes are checked on before you get married. That you both believe the same way in God. You both have the same views on money. And you both get along well with each other's families. If one of those boxes aren't checked, it will create discord in your marriage. And any time your marriage has discord in it, your ability to parent will have discord in it. When we see troubled youth today, almost always it can go back to some scars that they've developed because of their parents. So I would say, make sure that you're being the husband that you need to be first and foremost. The best opportunities in our life become the biggest responsibilities in our life. So don't wish for great opportunity if you're not willing to pay the sacrifice and price for it to become a responsibility.
All
Well,
right,
good,
man.
man. We've solved all the world's problems today, man.
I don't know about that, but
I think there's peace in the Middle East today, buddy.
I can assure you that that is not the case. I can speak on that one, and I can assure you that that is not the case.
Yeah.
There wasn't peace on Middle East.
You'd have been unemployed a long time ago, right?
Yes. Yes. All right, man. Well, I appreciate having you on here, and I definitely will. I know you're busy, man, but as this platform kicks off, if it does, and if it's in God's will, I'd love to circle back around and
Yeah.
solve some more problems here.
Yeah. So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, it's been good. I appreciate it.